So 3 drills that are more effective at releasing low back tension than stretching out your low back. I have to prescribe these all the time in the clinic because people come in with tight low backs. Everyone has a tight low back. And the way that people resolve that in most cases is to either throw some heat or some ice on it and then stretch it out with the basic toe touching kind of stretches or knee to chest kind of stretches that everyone's used for decades or eons or whatever. But these are not really the best ways to keep low back tension at bay indefinitely. So these drills will get you a lot further ahead in that regard. So the first one is kind of a hip flexor stretch that you're going to do with a glute activation, and you're going to do it rhythmically rather than just holding a position like you would with a stretch. So if I get into like the basic hip flexor stretch position, so I've got 90 degrees here, a nice straight hip, and I've got my butt squeezed on this side. It's going to flatten out my low back for me a little bit. So if my butt is not contracted, then I can arch my lower back a little bit. And a lot of people, when they do the hip flexor stretch, will just arch their spine and lean forward, which, you know, maybe that's stretching something. Most likely you're just going to hurt your hip. So I'm starting knee, hip, shoulder in a straight line. Glute is contracted hard as I can manage. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to preserve this angle. So I'm only going to go as far forward as I can while keeping my back straight. In and out. So my hip is changing position slightly, my back is not changing position at all. And this is going to buy me some mobility in my hip. It's going to relax my hip flexors, stop them from compressing my spine so much and pulling me into that arch position. And it's going to activate my glutes, which will also take some pressure off the spinal erectors. So I would do this 20 or 30 times, back and forth, keep that glute hard the entire time, and then switch sides. The next one that you want to do is quadruped rocking. So I get down into quadruped position on my hands and knees. I've got the soles of my feet facing the ceiling, so my feet are relaxed. And again, nice flat back here. So from this position, I'm going to squeeze my butt a little bit again. Notice the theme here. Squeeze my core a little bit as though someone's going to hit me. And then what I'm going to do is just rock my weight over top of my hands a little bit, and then just sit my hips back a little bit, almost like a squatting movement. But my low back is not changing position here. I'm not doing a cat-cow where it's all low back movement, and I'm not letting my back curl as I move back. And again, I'm only going as far as I can with control. So get in position, squeeze the glutes, squeeze the core, rock back and forth only as far as you can while that back remains perfectly straight, or rather with the neutral curves that you want. And again, do 20 or 30 repetitions of this. It's not going to directly stretch out the low back, but that's not what we want. We want the hips to be able to achieve the range of motion that we really need for our daily activities without drawing on the low back for mobility. So that's what that drill is going to teach you. The last one is 90-90 breathing. That's popularized by Postural Restoration Institute. So I put my feet up on a bench. You can also put them up with the soles of your feet against the wall. The idea is to lie flat on my back. And I want a 90-degree bend in my knee, 90-degree bend in my hip again. Just going to put my hands on my stomach here. I want my low back touching the floor. So for most people, there's going to be a lot of arch. I can slide my hand beneath that low back. I want you to correct that. I want you to get into more of a posterior pelvic tilt. So touch the low back to the floor. My tailbone lifts just slightly off the ground. And now I'm going to hold this position and do some deep breaths. So you can see my hands move as I breathe. And I'm just pulling down on the wall or on the bench with my heels ever so slightly, get my hamstrings contracted just a little bit, just to give me that posterior pelvic tilt, just a really, really gentle stretch for the erectors, the low back muscles. And as you're doing it, The breathing is going to kind of reset that muscle tone. It's going to activate the core. The hamstrings are, of course, active because you're pulling down. So those things are going to replace that low back tension with tension that's probably a bit more favorable, and hopefully there's going to give those muscles a reset. So no dramatic deep range of motion stretching necessary here. That stuff can get pretty dangerous pretty fast, especially if you have a bad back. So consider doing these 3 drills instead, and have fun. Get back to me with the results.